Welcome back. We're discussing the future of mining. You can join the conversation. Our line is open, or you can tweet us. Those details are on the bottom of the screen there. Let's pick up on some of the factors that are keeping people away. Safety surely is one of them, the high cost of labor. How do you resolve that?
Yes, safety is one of the big issues. You would know we as AMCU are constantly in the media about safety issues. And that's one of the problems of cutting corners. We normally say that corners are cut in order to maximize profit, and then normally human lives suffer. So that for us is a key issue.
And what is your advice to workers then?
Well, our advice firstly to workers would be, if you know the Mine Health and Safety Act, is Section 23 of that Act, gives workers the right to refuse to work. But more than that, we want companies to ensure that they do better, and mostly the state should regulate. If you look at the current makeup of mining companies, you'll see the traditional English, the Anglos of this world, normally self-regulate. But the newcomers, the young guys, I'm not going to mention names, cut corners. They have new ideas. So if you know in the UK, the health and safety standards are quite high. Whereas here, our regulation, even though Mr. Lorimer says that we are over-regulated, we believe in the terms of health and safety, we need more regulation.
Okay, we've got Ronnie on the line from Durban. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Good evening, Jane, and good evening to the panelists there. I've heard all the comments from the panelists, and I tend to agree with from James to the unionist. My concern is that the state has got it horribly wrong in running state institution. But we never heard a comment from neither the minister nor our new Don president in regarding with this retrenchment. And secondly, I think out of transparency, we need to know as a public, it's our money that is involved there, who are the directors of all these companies. And you'll be surprised, some of them are in the cabinet. And I just want to hear what the response is from your panelists. Jane, thank you thank you very much, and a great show.
Thank you. Thank you for your call. Would you like to answer that?
The problem with saying there needs to be more regulation, which of course there has to be, that the government can make a lot of speeches about improving the conditions of the workers, the community, the environment, all of which is necessary. But they cannot dictate to privately owned mining companies, many of which are based outside the country anyway.
Okay, but let's go back to, sorry, if we made the question there. I mean, why is the government being relatively quiet about this, and why is there's a little transparency when it comes to ownership? I mean, is that something that needs to be...
Yeah, that is precisely the point I'm getting at, that they're very limited in what they can do because they don't have ownership. They are dictated to, in effect, and of course the president himself is part of the mining establishment, and so he's hardly going to step out and say, we must put an end to this and take over these companies. And that's the struggle we have. And it's absolutely necessary, because otherwise we could have no mining industry at all. And what we have to remember is that unemployment isn't just a problem in the mining industry, it's right across the economy, particularly in manufacturing. And manufacturing will never thrive if there isn't a supply of the raw materials, many of which come from the mines.
Okay, let's ask James Lorimer about this. I mean, firstly, with an election year coming up, this is obviously awkward. This is bad news for the government. Being part of the DA, what are you going to do? I know I'm linking two things here, about the spiraling unemployment. I mean, what do you think you will be putting in your election plan?
Our way forward would be to, we view the mining industry as a national resource. And we think that if we run it correctly and we foster investment and we foster sensible mining, we can provide 20 to 30 years of economic injection, which will pull a lot of people out of poverty. But the problem with the government is it's trying to do too many things. It's trying to transfer ownership. It's trying to effectively empower cronies, which means that the full potential of the mining industry is not going to be realized. In fact, rather than growing, we're going to be declining. And that means we're going to miss out on a lot, because not only will people be losing jobs that they already have, but the huge potential to create a lot more jobs is not going to happen. And unfortunately, the government does not have the resources to, if it wanted to run the mining industry, to inject money into to create more money and to create more jobs. So the only way to do this is private enterprise.
Are we being seen as competitive on the continent as well? If you look at the JSE again, and you see how few companies there are listed compared to, say, the 80s, and compared to Canada and other places, are we losing our lead?
To some extent, Jane, but I want to return to two things. The one, the question of the caller, to ask why is government so silent. I must say, we as AMCU were pleasantly surprised last week when Minister Gwede Mantashe actually did slam the Impala retrenchments, calling them unnecessary. So for some, there's some traction being given to this issue of a business decision. The second part I want to get back to is James's point regarding private investment. In our thinking about nationalization, we also put one category aside, and that's the one of private-public partnerships, PPPs. The IDC, as you know, is quite a healthy institution financially. It has a lot of a socioeconomic mandate to fulfill. Then on the other hand, we have legitimate BEE entrepreneurs sitting in the ranks. So surely somehow we can bring these two together and create new hope, especially for these shafts that are in care and maintenance.
Okay, I mean, in the meantime, shafts are closing, people are losing their jobs, and I'm just wondering what the unions are doing about this. Are you providing alternative skills? Are there, I don't know, what do you have for the workers? What sort of advice are you giving them, and how strong is your future looking?
Well, I can't speak for all the unions, but certainly as far as SAFTU is concerned, we will fight to defend every single job. That's in the short term. We agree with the Minister that it was provocative to announce in advance that all these jobs were going to disappear without even attempting to have any discussion. And I think that's the problem. The people who run the mining industry are only interested in their short-term profits. And that's where this question of being competitive is problematical, because being competitive with who? With similar people in Australia and Canada and China, that shouldn't be the main basis for deciding policy on mining. We should see it as a national asset which should be run democratically in the interests of the people as a whole. So that's our longer term.
So many issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah. But also, I'd like to echo what Anku's saying about the wages. Wages are not high in the South African mining industry. In fact, they're very low compared to many countries. And it's an attempt to blame the workers. And,
but there are real labour issues as well, which frightens potential investors off. I mean, if you think of what happened after Marikana, I mean, that makes us vulnerable as well, doesn't it?
We have a terrible relationship in general between mining management and unions. And I really do think the unions need to bear some of the responsibility for this. They're one of the factors that drives away investment. And it's always interesting to me that the same companies who own platinum mines in South Africa also own platinum mines in Zimbabwe. Labour relations in those Zimbabwe mines are good and they make money.
And that's not happening in South Africa at the moment, aren't they, to expand that?
Well, yes.
Let's bring in Mike from Mpumalanga. Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, Jane. Good evening to you and your panel.
Good evening.
Jane, the role of government should be to create a conducive environment for businesses and people to thrive, not to be owning businesses. It's a pipe dream that government should own businesses, run businesses. Government creates a regulatory environment that is conducive for businesses and people to thrive. That's what they should be doing.
Good point. I mean, how conducive is South Africa's environment?
Well, as we say, it should be regulated more, but I want to respond to James.
Yeah, but how conducive is the environment? I mean, is it attractive for people to come in? Do they look at it and go, whoa, let's go to South Africa and make lots of money?
Anything
and,
but.
Look after everybody.
Yes, well, certainly. Do we need them to come in? Should we not look after ourselves?
Okay, well, it's a good start,
yes.
And that would probably make it more attractive for foreign investment, which would help too.
My comrade made earlier about competition. Who are we competing with? We should be looking after our own. That's what we should be doing. So I don't follow that line of thinking at all. Secondly, I want to respond to James. You know, in the Section 189 notice by Impala, there was not one word mentioned about labor unrest, or even high wages being a reason for the retrenchments. In none of the past ones, even though it is still a favorite Braai philosophy to say that it's because of the unions, it's because of Marikana that mining is in decline. It's a total fallacy. It's not true at all.
And what works to ram the message home? Does strike action work?
I'm sorry, I've got to take up on
Go
that.
ahead.
Do you really think that AMCU's strike that started at the end of 2014 of nearly 70,000 platinum mine workers for 5 months had no bearing on the viability of these platinum mines? Because if you want us to believe that, I'm sorry, that's a bit of a big step for me. And I think that's a direct example of how union militancy has made platinum mines in South Africa less viable and thus put jobs at risk.
I don't agree with you at all. The socio-economic needs of the communities were served better. You remind me of people who say that, why did we vote yes in '94? My question to them is, what if we voted no? What if there was no strike? What if there was no Marikana? Where would we have been? Maybe you think we would have been better off.
Do you think we're better off having had Marikana?
I think what happened there, the revolution that started there regarding workers and wages and socio-economic needs of our country made our country better. Since '94, I put it to you that since '94, that was the biggest stride we've made in addressing one of the key issues, which is inequality.
I absolutely agree, and I think that you have to acknowledge, though, that there has been a huge step forward in mining working conditions. In fact, if you look at mining jobs compared to jobs in other sectors in South Africa, mining jobs are better paid on average than jobs in manufacturing, jobs in construction, jobs in transport. Mining jobs are no longer terrible jobs. They're dangerous, yes, but they're relatively well paid, particularly for people who don't have formal skills.
All right, let's bring in Opa from Mpumalanga. Go ahead, Opa.
Yes, it's so critical in this era, because if you're looking at this issue of mining, right now the government has given the mines to the private owners, whereby one, you find ourselves, as where I'm working right now, I'm a contractor which is supplying Optima Met coal. So right now, and it's linked with the Gupta's family, I'm sorry to say that, because each and every month we're supposed to prepay on the 25th.
And tell us more about where you're working, Opa?
I'm working at the JIC Mining, under Gupta's related company, at Optima. So there is Optima, there's JIC, entity, whereby we produce coal, we supply Optimum is supplying Eskom.
Okay.
Then the issue is that, as from February, we are under, Optimum was under business rescue from February 18, but we as contractors, we are not paid each and every month. We're supposed to pay on the 15th, on the 25th, but we are not paid. Each and every month we must go to strike in order that we are supposed to be paid. Actually, we are paid each and every month on the 15th, on the 10th for the second month. 2, and also we find out that some of our third party is not paid. Like a person who's working underground. One, he on a risk, whereby he go underground. There is no medical aid.
Okay. Sorry, you raised quite a few things there, and possibly you'd like to answer what Opa was saying. I mean, how do you stop that sort of behavior from happening?
Sorry, it was a very bad line. Exactly what sort of behavior?
Yes.
We're actually active at that specific branch. What's happened there, Optima Mine went into business rescue. Now, how business rescue works is there's a
the lack
BRP,
of pay is what he raised.
there's a business rescue practitioner, and then the creditors must basically stand in line. And unfortunately, even though wages, when we discussed this at NEDLAC, we wanted to prioritize wages. But in reality, in practical senses, what happens is these comrades there, like this guy who just phoned in now, get paid late every month. It's very frustrating.
I can see now what the question was. And it raises an interesting point about why investors have a lack of confidence. Surely what happened there, involving the Gupta family and so on, does far, far more to discredit South African business and government than labour unrest. And I totally reject this idea that somehow people don't invest.
Come on.
And if it's true that people don't invest because the unions are too strong or too militant, well, that, I think, bears out everything I've been saying
I think that's not
about
the
role
reason,
of mining employers.
If I can
they
get
would
to,
like to have no unions so they could go back to the bad old days.
Optimum is a perfect example of malignant government interference. Here you had a great coal asset. There was a forced sale, forced by the previous Minister of Mines, to the Gupta company. They then stripped the thing bare. They stopped all those things. They stopped proper safety. People didn't have safety gear. They didn't look after the machinery. They basically stripped the mine of value. And here you have workers like our caller who are now sitting with a very uncertain future because government interfered.
I would say it's because capital interfered. That is capitalism at its best, stripping, looting, the way they did.
Hardly.
Exactly.
Yes,
And look at successful mining companies, countries in the world, places like Canada and Australia. They are private sector driven. There are no state mining companies. They're hugely successful and they provide huge benefits for their people.
Okay, let's leave it with those opposing views. Hopefully one day it'll all meet in the middle and we'll have a more successful industry. Gentlemen, thanks for talking to us. Christopher van Rensburg, Patrick Craven and James Lorimer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, at what age do children need to talk about sex? We'll debate it. This is Tonight with Jane Dutton.